Third POV. May click the play button, immediately playing the next death battle video. No anime tough guy trope is complete unless he has outrageous spiky hair. A sword that's clearly compensating for something. Wiz began, muttering suspiciously over the last part. And belts. Lots and lots of belts. Boomstick jumped in. Ooh, those kinds of guys do you look, Mina grinned. Oh yeah, spiky hair for the win. Kirishima pumped his fist into the air. This feels like similar traits to Cloud's strife, Todoroki pointed out. Especially the large swords. Kamakiri grinned, leaning in his seat expectantly as he saw the size of those awesome blades. My, what a stylistic choice. Midnight licked her lips at the multiple belts on these tall, hunky men. Midnight, behave, Nizu warned. Don't make me get the spray bottle. How ironic that it's the animal spraying the human with a spray bottle, Pixie Bob giggled. Ragna, the blood edge from BlazBlue, was introduced the first fighter. And Soul Badguy, the flame of corruption from Guilty Gear. Boomstick introduced the latter fighter. Soul Badguy. Ectoplasm repeated the name. A comical question mark over his head. What an odd choice of name. Either it is an alias or the guy's mother really set him up for failure, Hawks chuckled. He's Wiz and I'm Boomstick. Boomstick introduced both of themselves. And it's our job to analyze their weapons, armor, and skills to find out who would win a death battle. Wiz finished the intro. The first fighter looked like a textbook definition of the word edgy. The fighter stood at a tall height with long black pants that were baggy at the ends. A signature blood-red coat with silver pieces of armor on his elbows, wrists and sides, and varying belts of different sizes and shapes that many of the group joked that the man looked like the head of a bondage convention on top of looking edgy or badass. His torso was covered by a red coat and a black shirt with a stripe going up the middle to around the collar that Ibra thought looked similar to a priest's attire, minus everything else. The man wielded an overtly large cleaver of a sword. Its metal gleaming silver metal with red accents that reminded the group of Cloud Stripe's Buster Sword, only skinnier by comparison. The man had windswept, spiky, white hair, a constant frown, and mismatched eyes of red and blue respectively, ones that made Shoto Todoroki blink in surprise and acknowledgement. Ragna the Blood Edge. Nearly a century ago, humanity was hunted to near extinction by the fearsome black beast. Wiz began, showing ancient drawings of humanity cowering and running from a monstrous, multi-headed, dragon-like beast. Fortunately, 6 brave heroes slayed the monster and saved mankind. Izuku cringed at the sight of the multi-headed dragon in the drawings, triggering his memory of 9 and his Hydra quirk. Those heads kinda look like your dark shadow, Tokoyami, Siro pointed out. Tokoyami nodded, staring intently at how the drawings depicted this black beast as a calamitous force. That gaze narrowed at the memory of unintentionally chasing Shoji and Midoriya because he had lost control of Dark Shadow, his quirk becoming similar to one of this beast's heads. Revelry in the dark, the avian-headed teen muttered. The remains of humanity were reorganized under an oppressive government until one man decided to rise up. Ragna the Blood Edge was introduced, the white-haired fighter of the analysis. Rocking music played while showing clips of Ragna slashing his signature weapon against Lychee with brutal skill and standing in shadow looking before the silhouette of a large, impressive city. Yep, anime brooding bad boy to a T, Setsuna snickered. Manly, Kirishima and Tetsu whispered. The way this is depicted seems similar to a fighting game, Shoji noticed. Like Ryu, Scorpion, and the others. Good point, Shoji, Izuku said, writing down the possibility of Ragna and his whole world being seen as a video game series in another world. Baggy pants, giant sword, brooding personality. Boomstick listed Ragna broadly. Ragna has tragic backstory written all over him. I'd actually go with gruesome, Wiz argued. Backstory. Height. 6 feet 0.8 inches / 185 centimeters. Weight. 172 pounds. / 78 kilograms. Blood type, B. Alias, the Grim Reaper. Frequent dine and dasher. Bounty. $90 billion platinum. His foul mouth gives the angry video game nerd a run for his money. Has a crippling fear of ghosts. As a young child, he and his siblings were confined in an experimental facility as lab rats. Was revealed Ragna's backstory. Eri whimpered lightly and tightened her hug on her papa's leg. Izuku and Mirio noticed and frowned sadly and angrily. The two knew nothing of what Eri's life was before Overhaul and the Hasaikai, but they knew that the girl had suffered terribly for years under Overhaul's knife and cruel experiments. Todoroki narrowed his eyes as well. While not as tortuous and grim as Eri, Shoto couldn't help but feel like he and his siblings lived a similar life. They only came to be because of their father's obsession with surpassing all might. And when he couldn't do it himself, Endeavor turned to his offspring, achieved through a quirk marriage with their mother, Rei. Tuya was first and was believed by their father to be perfect enough for his goal, and then had Fuyumi as a backup. When Tuya failed to live up to Endeavor's vision, he had Natsuo. And then when he failed, only then did Shoto Todoroki himself come to be. His father's perfect heir and weapon against all might. Shoto may have been on better terms with his father, still only seen as such in the barest terms of the word, but the white and red-haired boy still couldn't deny how he and his siblings were treated and viewed by their father. Lab rats created for their father's dream and their mother the woman forced to bear them. Bummer, Boomstick muttered. What were they trying to do? Oh, just your typical experiments and looking for a vessel for a cruel and chaotic psychopath, was answered matter-of-factly. Come again. Boomstick did a double take. I second that notion. Come again. Itsuka exclaimed, greatly concerned. The important thing here is they were rescued by a talking cat named Jubii, who also happened to be the most feared warrior on the planet and one of the very 6 heroes that defeated the Black Beast in the first place, was moved on. Ooh. Ninja Kitty. Ragdoll squealed in delight. Badass Ninja Kitty, Tomoko. Pixie Bob corrected her friend. And if this Jubii is one of these heroes that defeated that monster, then it would mean that he is more than a century old, Tiger noted. Perhaps whatever kind of feline species he is, they live longer than the average human lifespan, let alone a cat, Mandalay figured. Eri smiled at Jubii rescuing Ragna and his siblings, thinking it was like when Papa and the other heroes rescued her from Chisaki. However, things took a darker turn when Ragna's frail sister, Soya, grew ill with a terrible fever, was continued, showing Soya's sickly person. Oh no, Pony whimpered sadly. First getting experimented on by shady scientists, and now this. The guy can't catch a break, Kaminari scoffed. Ah, close loved one dying from sudden sickness. Boomstick sighed as he listed another attribute for an edgy bad boy. What's next? Evil brother that stabs him in the back. More like the front, was answered. Wait, what? Hagakure this time did the double take. Ragna took Saya under his wing, but their younger brother, Jean, was irritated that Ragna was not spending more time with him, was explained further. Being a reasonable guy, he decided the only solution was to murder his brother. Seriously? Ochiko's eyes blinked, shocked. How could he? Endeavor's fists clenched tightly while memory took him back to the past. He remembered when Tuya looked at baby Shoto with jealousy and anger, believing that he cared more for one brother than the other, and tried to attack him, even though he was in Rei's arms. After that, Endeavor forbade Shoto to come any close to Tuya, always aware that Tuya stared at the both of them with that same jealousy and anger, only festering further. Yet, the man did not know what else to do to ensure both of their safety back then. Oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense, Boomstick exclaimed. I'm lonely, so I'll kill one of the only people I care about. Great plan. Toshinori frowned as he imagined how similar this must have been with All for One and his younger brother, the first wielder of One for All. Little did the former symbol of peace know. He hit a bullseye. Izuku's eyes flinched, looking down at particularly nothing but the memory of his dream of One for All before the joint training exercise with Class B. The 9th wielder of the quirk saw how One for All began, how All for One had locked his little brother in a cell, proclaimed some words about doing this for the brother's good, and then gifting him the stockpiling quirk that would come to fuse with the brother's quirk. Izuku felt sadness and grief and knew it came from the first wielder himself, and Izuku could almost feel the sensation of being ripped apart. But really, a maniacal hipster villain named Yuki Terumi showed up and convinced Jean to impale Ragna through the chest, and then cut off his arm for good measure. Boomstick jumped in, showing Jean impaling and slashing off his brother's arm under the orders of the grinning psychopath. The thing about manipulating someone is that you would only be able to do something this extreme unless deep down you wanted to do it, Shinso said. Regardless of whatever tricks or honeyed words that came out of that silver tongue, unless you are forced to do it, that boy wanted to kill his brother, deep down. Aoyama did his best to hide his shame and pain, but he couldn't stop his constant smile from falling into a frown. Is that how you died? From your own brother? Izuku asked the first user, hoping for a response. Izuku got nothing. Terumi did this by convincing Jean that he was destined to be the hero to slay the Black Beast once again. Was explained again. And the one that would be the Black Beast reborn was dear old Big Bro who wanted to spend more time tending to their sickly sister than play with your annoying Winnie ass. Boomstick finished Wiz's sentence. Sounds reasonable. The enticing allure of greatness beyond his meager life, the draw of meaningful purpose to the struggles of his past pain, and the feelings of jealousy and resentment, Edgeshot listed. With a final touch of making his resentment feel justified by painting the guilty party as an other, a wrong, and a monster. Hawks frowned as he thought about the forces of the now Paranormal Liberation Front. The winged hero wondered how many ended up drawn to his army by one of those reasons, whether it be feeling like it gave them purpose or Redestro and his acolytes painting hero society as the others and enemies to throw all their pent-up resentment and pain onto. He wondered if that held true for the League themselves, as he knew how devoted Twice was to support those he saw as his friends, even if they were villains. Bakugo cringed as his mind took him back to his childhood with Deku. The green-haired kid was always around and hanging on to Bakugo as far as the ash-blonde teen could remember. They played with the same All Might toys, fanned over their shared idol, and both desired to be heroes. But then somewhere along those lines they grew apart, and all of it was his fault. He let those words of praise from the teachers and classmates butter him up like a Thanksgiving turkey, filled his head with promises of being a great hero, and supported his every action as the right action, no matter how cruel it was toward Deku. Bakugo couldn't even blame them for how he bullied Deku for all those years. Believe him. He tried, and the best he could stomach as true was those lackeys never said or did anything to the contrary. He started picking on Deku for not being as great as he was on practically anything. He was the one whose pride couldn't stomach the idea of little Deku trying to help him up from the creek, thinking he was looking down on him, and he was the one that landed the first blow, the first explosion on Daizuku's body, and the rest just followed and ate his words up that what he was doing was right too. Granted, an order-loving sword was also influencing him, but yeah, reasonable, was said sarcastically. That still feels like a piss-poor excuse for wanting to stab your own kin, Mirako huffed, incensed. The boy was still a kid, an easy target to manipulate and corrupt, Ryukyu pointed out. I'm not saying he's not in the wrong, but it is clear that he was led astray. Toshinori's frown deepened at Ryukyu's words. Gran Torino's advice regarding Shigaraki rang like hers about Shigaraki still being a villain. However, Dragoon Hero's words about Shimura's grandson led astray still poked at his mind as reason enough to try and reach out to the decaying villain. But then he saw the insane devotion that Shigaraki had toward his hatred of him. His desire to tear this world down because he wanted to, and his loyalty to All for One. All Might still struggled with a simple question. It wasn't whether Shigaraki wished to be saved, and Hero's true grit and job was to help where they didn't belong, but whether he even could be saved. Moving on for sanity's sake, Ragna would have been done for until an omniscient time-traveling pig-tailed vampire descended from the heavens, snapped her fingers, magicked him a new arm and left. Boomstick summarized, showing said pig-tailed vampire appearing and creating Ragna a new arm. At the same time, his right eye changed color to red. What in the Kamakiri almost cursed. No, don't think. Just accept. Boomstick unintentionally interrupted the blade-producing 1B student. Despite Boomstick's words, Shoto still paused over Ragna's transformation and the change in his eye color. At first, Todoroki assumed the changed color was the left one. But to see the opposite felt like his world was flipped upside down. For so long, he had glimpsed his left side as a curse, from the same quirk as his father to the looks his mother thought looked unbearable. Seeing Ragna go through something similar with his right side made Todoroki's theorist mind wonder what would have been if it was his right side that he detested, if it was his mother he held resentment towards for burning him rather than his father. Azure Grimoire gives Ragna virtually unmatched control over Seether, absorbs the soul of its target, augmented by the idea engine, acquired from the dying carrot, No. 11, adds the ability to create a force field, can activate Blood Cane without losing his life force, turned Ragna's right eye red when it bonded with him, doubles Ragna's attack power. Surprisingly still conscious and apparently an expert on things that never happened before, Ragna instantly recognized his new appendage as an Azure Grimoire, a piece of the Black Beast which Ragna can use to manipulate Seether, was continued with Ragna's new arm and the red eye-like orb on the back of the hand. Would you look at that, Fat Gum muttered. He was left for dead by his brother because that guy said he was going to be the Black Beast, and now he has a part of it as his right arm. Imagine that. A tragic and ironic fate, one that was sought to be avoided but ended up coming to pass in another way, Cementos said. Seether is a radioactive energy left behind by the Black Beast all over the world, was explained. Like magic, Boomstick simplified. Well, kind of, was admitted. It is translated to magic element, and they are treated like two different things, but they are pretty much the same. Like a distinction without a difference. Shoda guessed. Possibly, Jirota shrugged. Perhaps Seether gives access to a different branch of abilities and powers that regular magic wouldn't. I like the eye on the back of Ragna's hand, Korwaro pointed, wondering if he could sink into the black arm or be unable to because of its magic or something. Revelry in the dark. Revelry in the dark. Tokoyami and Reiko joined in. Okay, you adorable little goths. Let's just get back to the analysis, please. Setsuna snickered. Okay. Boomstick shrugged off. Well, after missing out on the maiming and resurrection of Ragna, Jubii the cat ninja returned and decided to teach him the ways of combat. Where the hell was he during all that? Kamakiri raised an eyebrow. Tearing apart someone's furniture. They did say he was one of the heroes who slayed the Black Beast, so perhaps he was out doing other kinds of hero work, or their equivalent in this world when Terumi showed up, Hananuki guessed. Moveset. Hell's Fong. Dashes in with a Seether-enhanced punch. Inferno Divider. A rising leap slash using his sword. Gauntlet Hades. Downward strike powered by Seether. Dead Spike. Summons the jaws of the Black Beast. Blood Cane. Boosts speed, power and soul-draining ability. Through his training, Ragna's control over Seether became practically unmatched. Wiz began listing Ragna's abilities. He can form various parts of the Black Beast in combat, transform his own arm into razor-sharp claws, or drain the soul of his foe through his strikes. Looks very similar to your quirk, Tokoyami? Izui asked curiously. Indeed. Tokoyami nodded. He even got flashes of déjà vu when he saw Ragna using the first two moves as if he was launching out Dark Shadow or lashing out Dark Shadow's claws himself. Though the ability to drain a foe's soul through contact is something Dark Shadow cannot do. That kind of power sounds like a unique hybrid between Rogue's draining touch and Shang Tsung's or Shao Kahn's ability to suck the souls from others. Izuku looked through his notes. But if he needs more power, more defense and more soul-sucking, he can crank these up to 11 with his Blood Cane form, Boomstick added, pausing slightly at the soul-sucking part. And the power to enhance his attributes and abilities for a short period appears similar to Ryu or Akuma, whenever he uses the Satsue no Heido or the former using the power of nothingness, Momo added. Or that M. Bison guy, Jiro pointed out. Upon completing his training, Jubii bestowed upon him a red cloak and a deadly blade called the Aramesa, more commonly known as the Blood Scythe, was revealed Ragna's signature blade. Finally, Kamakiri grinned, excited to finally get into the fighter's badass blade. Ida and Ochiko were rather uncomfortable with the aesthetic and naming around the Blood Scythe, drawing their respective discomfort from their personal traumas. When Ida saw the blood-red aesthetic of Ragna's coat and blade, he couldn't help but remember Stain, the hero killer, and his blood-curdle quirk. In contrast, Ochako saw Toga and her fixation on blood from the red coloring and naming convention. This baby can extend for stabbing strikes and, like the Azure Grimoire, slowly drains the souls of its victims upon contact. Boomstick jumped in. So, not only can he drain his enemy's soul through strikes and abilities with his right arm, but also through the use of his weapon for longer range. Monoma nodded, wishing that he could likewise possess a long-reaching weapon, a staff, or a cane to fit his Phantom Thief aesthetic, that could allow him to copy their quirk through the weapon's contact. Perhaps I should turn to Hatsum or Shield for such a weapon, Monoma pondered, his gaze lingering on Melissa with greater interest. Unknowingly to him, a certain green-haired teen had the sudden desire to punt the blonde's ass to the moon. Cool and all, but it looks like a big sword, Cozy Eye pointed out. Why the hell is it called a scythe? And before you point out that it's clearly a sword and not a scythe, it can do this. Boomstick unintentionally answered Cozy Eye too. Ragna used his astral heat on Arakan, turning the sword into a scythe before attacking the poor enemy in a vicious combo. Astral finish, an announcer exclaimed. Okay, does Boomstick suddenly have the same fourth wall-breaking powers as Deadpool? Or are we just the predictable? Nast, you really want us to answer that question? Setsuna raised an eyebrow at him with a teasing smirk on her lips. Never mind, Sin muttered. Ragna's angsty rage took him on a world tour of single-handed government smashing, earning him the nickname, the Grim Reaper, Boomstick noted. So, while the government views him as a villain, he seems to come off more as an anti-hero or even anti-villain. Midnight muttered. Anti-villain? Pony-ass. A person with noble and even heroic traits and goals but uses questionable or evil acts to achieve them, Izuku informed, glancing toward Ida cautiously. For as cruel as he was, you could say that Stain could be an example of an anti-villain. Ida frowned yet sighed in reluctance. Agreed, Ida nodded. He may have had good intentions for the improvement of our society, but the aims he reached to achieve that, including attacking my brother and other heroes, made him no different than a villain. And racking up an unprecedented bounty of 90 billion platinum dollars, was added, Tokaka revealing to him the bounty while the man himself deadpanned at the face on the poster. Just think of it as regular dollars. Ftahahaha, Miruko burst out laughing. What kind of face is that? Did he take a picture of him while he was constipated, or was that just a rough sketch or something? Don't know, but damn, that's a lot of cheddar there, Snipe whistled. Guy probably gets jumped everywhere he goes. But despite being the largest bounty of all time, he still freely walks the world on foot and in public with no attempt to disguise himself whatsoever, was mentioned. I stand corrected, Snipe muttered. Wait a minute, Izuku blinked, perking up. May, can you rewind when that girl showed the poster to Ragna? Aye, muscles. May saluted and did as instructed, rewinding and pausing just before the poster was shown. There, that's Tokaka, Izuku pointed out. Toga's counterpart. Ochako flinched at the mention of the blood-sucking psychopath. Oh yeah, I remember. She's the one who ripped Othami in half. Nijire pouted, waving her arms childishly. I'm still so bad about that. I want a rematch. I guess this means Tokaka and Ragna exist in the same universe. Azui croaked out. Feats. Accelerated healing ability. Extremely high pain tolerance. Taken many impale wounds through vital organs. Sacrificed his left arm showing 0 pain. Punched a crater into a wall with his non-azure grimoire hand. Defeated the gigantic anti-black beast bioweapon. Take Mikazuchi. Can defeat Mirakumo units without using his azure grimoire. Probably because nobody wants to piss him off, Boomstick responded. We're talking about a guy who treats getting knocked through solid concrete as an inconvenience. Has survived multiple impalings through the chest. Took out hundreds of armed officers without breaking a sweat. And obliterated an entire street with a single one-hand sword strike. Yep, accelerated healing. Setsuna snapped her fingers and pointed to the attribute. And you have to have a high pain tolerance to get stabbed like that over and over. Jesus, Sato muttered, seeing Ragna obliterate the street. Ragna is referred to by some as the most powerful man in the world, but he's also known as a risk-taker with a short temper. Was pointed out his weaknesses as Ragna was grabbed and lifted by the throat, which could lead him into a compromising and dangerous situation in his death battle, Vlad King noted. One that could spell his end. And despite being trained by the most dangerous kitty cat in the world, Ragna's obviously nowhere near Jubei's level of skill, who terrifies even the deadliest villains of the series, Boomstick added. If that's Terumi, then this leads credence to the possibility that the man struck and influenced Jean to kill his brother when Jubei was away, Endeavor analyzed. But after all said and done, Jubei left Ragna with a dire warning. Never think of the Azure Grimoire as your own, was read Jubei's warning to his student. Which is kind of bullshit, Boomstick commented. I mean, it's attached to him, so I'm pretty sure he's got dibs. Well, he does, but if he loses control over it, it can transform him into the Black Beast itself, was explained, showing Ragna losing control through anger and becoming the Black Beast. In fact, Ragna was the original Black Beast, sent back in time after falling into a magic cauldron. The two were somehow separated and did battle in the past. Huh! Multiple members of the group exclaimed. Why, you mean that he became that? Hagakure exclaimed, gesturing at the multi-headed monster that terrorized the world of BlazBlue. But how? A time travel, quite a tricky and unpredictable concept, Nizu sighed. Tokoyami flinched at seeing Ragna fall to anger and become the Black Beast. He felt like seeing himself fall to his rage and dark shadow going on a rampage that threatened his classmates and friends. But to see that Ragna was always destined to become the Black Beast gave Tokoyami quite the dark possibility that he always feared. That he would be unable to control Dark Shadow at some point, falling to his own quirk's influence, and becoming the monstrous demon that so many feared he would be. Especially those among the Creature Rejection clan or their supporters that taunted him in his youth. These events would repeat themselves in a 100-year time loop until the intervention of Noelle Vermilion, one of 3 clones of Ragna's own sister, Saya, was revealed. She saved Ragna from falling into that cauldron, stopping the Black Beast from appearing in the past in the first place. The way Noelle leaped after Ragna to save him brought Izuku his own flash of déjà vu. He remembered his match against Monoma's team, and when Black Whip emerged during the joint training exercise. The new quirk went wild, destroying everything around him with no regard or order. He felt like he was tied to a rampaging monster, much like the out-of-control Dark Shadow or the Black Beast. But then Ochako leaped in and grabbed onto him, hugging him, trying to plead and calm him down to take control of Black Whip. Izuku would always remember the act as brave, warming his chest and smiling every time he thought about it. Looking over at Ochako, Izuku took into account all that he knew about his feelings for her, and the feelings she had for him in turn, or so Setsuna said. Whenever I'm always in trouble, you always seem to come to my rescue, Izuku thought, thinking back to when she first helped him up at the gates of UA to saving him from falling to his death in the entrance exam, when she joined his team for the second event of Sports Festival despite the risks, aiding and cheering for him at I-Island against Wolfram, helping him in trying to get Tokoyami and Bakuga back from Mr. Compress at the training camp, teaming up with him to pass the first half of the provisional licensing exam, and fighting together against 9 at Nabu Island. She was always there to help when he was in trouble. My hero, Izuku thought warmly, smiling softly while recognizing the feelings this girl made him feel. The first girl that truly talked to him, his first real girl as a friend, and the first one that he truly fell in love with. And she's not the only one. Izuku glanced at the rest of the girls around him, feeling different, yet similar feelings for them that all came to the same conclusion. But now, what do I do? But if the Black Beast never went back in time, then it never would have created Seether, and everything in BlazBlue shouldn't exist as we know it, Boomstick pointed out, confused. Yes, that does present quite the paradox, Nizu muttered, working his enhanced brain for a solution. Well, this can be all solved through 2 simple words. Multiverse theory, was explained. Turns out, the leader of the 6 heroes, Hakumen, is an alternate future cyborg of Ragna's brother, Jean, revealing that multiple timelines and time travel are in fact possible. And Noel saving Ragna's life created an alternate timeline, saving Ragna from his grim fate. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Boomstick muttered, still totally unconvinced. I'm the main character, and yet again, I get left in the dark. It's really starting to piss me off. Ragna raged. The group held mixed opinions about Ragna, ranging from sympathy for his tragic backstory and ever-increasing bad luck, wariness over his true form as the black beast that could be unleashed with his anger and his clear disdain for authority, to acknowledged awe and praise of his resilience and strength. Tokoyami felt connected with the Grim Reaper and his plight to control a dark, monstrous beast inside him. At the same time, Hawks envied Ragna's free spirit and ability to stand up against the oppressive government of his world. The next fighter, the group could see clearly why he was chosen to fight Ragna just from one look alone. Standing equally as tall as his opponent, the man was dressed in white pants, red sneakers, and a black shirt that hugged his chiseled abs like a second layer of skin that ended in an open-popped red collar that flashed his pecs to the world. His arms were sleeveless till the black and brown gloves that reached up his bulging forearms with his fingertips left open. Like Ragna, belts were strapped all over the fighter, from short ones on each of his hands, a couple on each of his thighs, one around the middle of his torso, and one on his waist that had a belt buckle with the word "free" on it and had a red loincloth run down with belt buckles all around the sides of the cloth. The man's forehead was covered in a large red headpiece that held the words "Rock You" carved onto it. He had brown, forward spiky hair, the remains flowing in a long ponytail by the back, brown eyes, and his constant smirk complemented his chiseled jawline. The fighter also held an equally large silver and red sword. Soul Badguy. Way back in the year 2010, the discovery of magic forever changed the course of human history. Began. Traditional technology was eliminated for newer and environmentally friendly methods. And after improving the planet, a certain world superpower sought to improve mankind itself. All Might, David, Melissa, and Pony blinked in shock and horror at the sight of the Statue of Liberty in shambles. Ibra perked up at the mention of newer, environmentally friendly technology, and her interest grew. This sounds rather similar to the dawning of quirks, Izuku thought, remembering his world's history. The dawning of quirks was both the beginning of a new age of humanity and the destruction of the prior. Societal unrest plagued all the nations of the globe as more people manifested quirks. Conflict ensued from the powerless majority's fear of these powers, and those with these new quirks either fought back to defend themselves or used their newfound gifts for personal gain. The time of the dawning was an age of chaos, fighting, and fear, with much of the documentation of the time riddled with obscurity, and even elements of different cultures like pop culture were lost or forgotten with the new craze of quirks, villains, and later heroes. Oh hey, another super soldier project. Boomstick rolled his eyes. Let me guess, they injected this guy with some serum, and it didn't really work out the way they wanted, but now he's a badass? Replace serum with magic and close enough, Wiz agreed. That seems to be a constant throughout many universes, Giroda commented, remembering Deadpool and Deathstroke both being experimented on with different projects meant to turn them into living weapons. Alongside this Wolverine they learned from Deadpool's analysis. The desire for power is a greed that poisons the hearts of all into turning their fellow humans into nothing more than tools and puppets, Korwaro muttered. Though, there are times where the strive of power is in service and protection of the greater good, Ibra pointed out optimistically. All Might smiled at the two, discussing the light and dark sides of seeking power. When Korwaro mentioned the corrupting influence of greed and desire for power, he immediately thought of All for One and his desire to house the strongest quirks within him and place the whole world under his grasp. Then Ibra mentioned the nobler means of seeking power, and it shifted the retired pro's thoughts to One for All, the past wielder's goal to keep the power safe from All for One and to pass it to others in hopes to grow and cultivate the power to one day defeat All for One. All Might thought he had achieved that dream, only for All for One to prove his resilience. It is one of my greatest regrets that I couldn't end this story when I had the chance, and that you are forced to fix my mistakes, young Midoriya, All Might thought, looking to his green-haired successor. But I know you will finish our collective mission and become a greater hero than I ever could be. This man would emerge as the feared bounty hunter, Soul Badguy. Again, what an interesting choice for a name, Edgeshot muttered. Weird name aside, his status as a bounty hunter is interesting, Ryukyu pointed out. Perhaps they will go for Soul fighting Ragna for the latter's bounty as the explanation for the fight. So, he's clearly the bad guy, Boomstick assumed. Actually, he's the main hero of the story, was corrected. Well, then why would they dash? Boomstick sputtered and tried to ask further, yet was continued. Well, change interesting to ironic, Miruko snickered. What's the bad guy's name? Peaceful dude. Background. Height. 6 feet 0 inches / 184 centimeters. Weight. 163 pounds. / 74 kilograms. Real name Frederick. Alias Hitoku no Hanu, Flame of Corruption. Favorite band Queen. Ironically Guilty Gear's main protagonist, despite the name. Has a degree in particle physics. Before Soul's transformation, he was known as Frederick, a scientist tasked with leading the Super Solida project alongside his love interest Arya. Was explained Soul's backstory, showing the man's auburn-haired love interest. But whether he intended to or not, Frederick would become the prototype of this new super race, the Gears. Gears. Melissa repeated the name. Ooh. Maybe this is like quirked humans created through technology and magic, rather than science and biology. May proposed an explanation for the name. An interesting hypothesis, Nizu hummed. I suppose we will see soon enough. But is he guilty? Boomstick wittingly joked. Huh. Kinoko quirked her head in confusion. Guilty of what? I think Boomstick is trying to make a pun about the world that they say Soul Badguy is from, Itsuka explained to her classmate. Guilty Gear, right? Right, Izuku nodded. Oh hell yeah. He was responsible for Arya's death, was revealed. And then her next death when she was resurrected into this thing, was showed the first gear with free will. Justice. He killed the love of his life. Pony whimpered, sad. Why? Perhaps the first death was less of him intentionally murdering her and perhaps simply responsible for the accident that killed her, Momo responded, her eyes looking aimlessly as she imagined the scenario she presented, only for her to be resurrected into a facsimile of her former self sent to oppose him, and force Frederick to confront his past and sins by putting his former love to rest, once and for all. Okay, I think you need to stop reading those romance novels, Yamamoto, Kyoka said. Momo blushed scarlet while her classmates laughed. Oh, wasn't expecting her to look like that, Boomstick muttered surprised. But not as much as I wasn't expecting the blue robo-penis. Who even does that? Curse that man's vulgar mind, Ibra groaned, face palming. Well, it's certainly an interesting design aesthetic, Melissa nervously chuckled. Izuku chuckled alongside her, though he noticed a certain empty spot on the couch next to her. Looking over to where the device was, Izuku shot out Black Whip and dragged May back to them. Ah! May whined as she was pulled and tied back to her couch spot. She was likely created as a giant phew. To pour soul by that man, was figured. Sorry, what? Mount Lady blinked, shaking her head in confusion. Which man? Boomstick asked. That man, was answered, the screen showing Soul ready to fight justice. Does he mean Soul? Pixie Bob scratched her head. No, that can't be right. Glad King shook his head. Wizard just stated his lover's transformation into the machine was done antagonistically towards Soul. So the man can't have done it himself. I only see Soul Badguy, Boomstick responded, still confused. No, it's that man, was repeated. Okay, I'm really confused now. Kaminari rubbed his poor aching head. No surprise there, Zero muttered. Hush you, Kaminari hissed at him. So, Iz was referring to that mech gear, or whatever that Arya chick became. How would that work? Tetsu quirked an eyebrow. You mean that someone is possessing that robot like a virus or ghost? I don't know, Kaminari shrugged. I'm just as lost as you here, man. It's just me and you here, Wiz, Boomstick said, likely looking around whatever room they were in. Listen, the villain is that man, Wiz tried to explain, this time showing both Soul and a hooded man. Soul Badguy's the hero and the villain? Boomstick questioned. No, he's another character dash, Wiz continued futilely explaining. Papa, what does Mr. Wizard mean? I'm confused, Eri asked innocently. Well, if Wizard is right, then remember how funny and weird Soul Badguy's name is. Izuku asked Eri, to which she responded with a nod. Well, I think this means there is another character who wants to harm Soul, but he also has a weird and funny name, and it is that and man. Oh, Eri and Kuta exclaimed. What? There is a Mr. That Man who is the villain and probably wants to defeat Mr. Soul Badguy the hero, Azui summarized. Oh, I see. Eri smiled brightly. Thanks, my mean Miss Tsu. Yeah, she's a better explainer than you, Deku, Kuta mocked playfully, making Izuku almost mistake him for a copy of young Kaken. Why yes, sorry. Izuku shook his head from the weird deja vu and apologized. Izuku turned to Azui. Thanks for that, Tsu. You sure know your way around kids, huh? Taking care of my young siblings gave me experience, Azui nodded. Also, you called me Tsu without correcting yourself. Oh, I did. Ha, I guess practice does make perfect. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, smiling brightly at Tsu. Karo, Tsu blushed and croaked wantingly. Mineta grumbled jealously as he stared at Midoriya and Azui, unintentionally acting like a married couple, with Eri and Kuta as their kids. First Momo, his plan A, then Mina, his plan B, Nijire and Melissa, both of whom weren't even in his plans because he was realistic enough to see he had no chance with them, and Uraraka, his plan D, which even he was skeptical of with the girl's obvious interest in Midoriya. But now Azui too. His plan C. Okay, that does it. I'm definitely going to sneak in on their training session, Mineta declared. Someone has to stop Midoriya from wooing any more of the girls, or there won't be any left for Mia. I mean, for the rest of us. Just pretend Soul Badguy's not there. You mean he's invisible? Boomstick exclaimed. Okay, he has to be playing with him, right? Hagakure face-bombed, though they only knew because of the sound of her palm slapping her forehead. With that guy you never know, Kyoka shrugged. You mean that man? Setsuna and Mina said together, leaning over and smiling mischievously at her. Jiro gave them a nasty glare and her jacks raised threateningly. When this person was born into the world, his parents looked at this child and decided to name him that man. Wiz insisted, showing a scene of that man coming out of a portal. Who were they looking at, Wiz? Boomstick questioned again, now frustrated. Okay, he's definitely not playing, Kirishima muttered, deadpanning. I am losing brain cells entertaining this foolishness. Endeavor pinched the bridge of his nose. Oh no, we can't have that, number one. Hawks gasped dramatically. We can't have you losing any more of those. You already burned away your happy brain cells with all the heat from your flames. Silence, Endeavor snapped. His name is JT Space In. Wiz exclaimed, exasperated. Well, Fusuke Space Woo. I'm out. Boomstick yelled back, followed by the sound of a door slamming shut and the screen pausing in gray. Did he just leave whatever recording booth they were in? Cozy Eye pointed at the screen. Sometime later. My guess is yes, Hananuki muttered. So, I looked at the internet and discovered that his actual name is that man, Boomstick muttered as he returned. I apologize for earlier. Let's move on. Thank God, Mandalay groaned in relief. I admit whatever that was a little funny, but that grew obnoxious at the end. I wish we could say the same whenever someone keeps jacking me. Kaminari rolled his eyes, muttering. Amen to that. Mineta raised a drink to that sentiment. Then just don't act like morons, you whining idiots. Bakugo snapped at the two. Soul had to maintain a human appearance to disguise his true gear form. Wiz continued with the video. So, he developed a special limiter headpiece to keep his own power at bay. was showed an image of Soul Badguy's headpiece. If that thing comes off, say goodbye to whoever recently pissed him off. Boomstick jumped in. So that's what that is for, Ochako gasped. I thought it was just something he wore that looked cool. Yeah, that Rokyu on the piece was manly, Kirishima grinned. Reminds me of the limiter bracers we used for the students' final exams, Powerloader mentioned. Weren't strong enough for this lug to nearly send Midoriya and Bakugo to the hospital. Recovery Girl poked at All Might with her syringe cane. I said I was sorry, All Might muttered. Sorry doesn't cut nearly breaking Midoriya's spine now, does it? Kyo snarked back. Regardless of All Might's carelessness, an important thing to note is that this means that Soul Badguy's human visage is not his true form, Nizu pointed out. This ties in comparatively to Ragna's most powerful form, the Black Beast. The difference though is that Soul can transform into his true form more easily by removing his limiter piece, while Ragna needs sufficient anger and loss of control to become the Black Beast, David added. That means Soul can access his truest potential easier than Ragna. As a gear, Soul's aging was slowed to a near halt, allowing him more than enough time to develop his own fighting style, was explained. So, he's also functionally immortal, Cementos guessed. Likely with the only method for him to die being through a fatal wound or injury. Well, whatever fighting style lets you punch fire, that's the one I want to learn, Boomstick exclaimed, excited. A pyrokinetic, Todoroki perked up. His interest heightened by how Boomstick referred to it as punch fire. Endeavor noticed this, and while he denied smiling, the urge to do so after hearing his son pay more attention to his neglected fireside was strong. Moveset, Gun Flame. Shoots fire projectiles from the ground. Commonly mistaken for girlfriend when called out. Bandit Revolver. A forward-moving spinning kick. Riot Stomp. Springs off the wall and flies in foot first. Volcanic Viper. Leaps upward, slashes with his sword. Dragon Install. Temporary enhances speed and power. Soul's Volcanic Viper and Fafnir punches are flame-enhanced strikes, while his Riot Stomp flies in with a fearsome kick. Boomstick listed some of Soul's moves. Soul's Riot Stomp shares a bit of similarity with my Shirani, no? Ida asked. Oh yeah, you're right, Ida, Ochako noticed and spoke. She moves and jumps from one side of the screen to the other, just like him. And both have power over fire too. Shoto analyzed Soul's every move and technique, while the man's Riot Stomp is effectively useless for him. The same goes for the Volcanic Viper without a sword. The Fafnir punch was interesting. It reminded him of his father's Vanishing Fist technique, and the youngest Todoroki pondered if he should incorporate it. Over. Are you looking to see if Soul has moves for you to copy, Todoroki? Izuku asked, noticing Shoto's greater interest. Indeed, Midoriya, Shoto nodded, seeing no use in lying to his best friend about his interest. Maybe he could even help. I don't have as much practice in utilizing my left side. Utilizing more techniques could help even the balance with my right side. This bad guy's Fafnir punches, Gun Flame, and Volcanic Viper seem optimal to learn. Yet Volcanic Viper requires a sword, and while Fafnir punch is like my father's Vanishing Fist dash. You don't have the same strength as Endeavor. Izuku finished Shoto's train of thought. While you are decently strong, you don't have the same muscular physique or strength as Endeavor. Izuku almost chuckled at the irony of this situation. This is just like how I started developing my shoot style. When Shoto nodded, Izuku dug up his file on Shoto and began looking through it while writing down some new possibilities. Well, if you don't have as much strength in arms as your father, there are your legs to consider, Izuku pointed out. My legs? Shoto blinked. Yeah, if you're worried about close quarters combat with a faster opponent, you don't have to focus on your fists solely. Izuku gave the notebook with the related pages open to Shoto. You remember what almost happened with Stain, right? Izuku whispered that last part. Yeah, Shoto nodded, cringing as he recalled how he almost lost his arm to Stain's katana. If it hadn't been for Ida kicking the blade away, Shoto would have lost an arm just as he reconciled in using both sides of his quirk. Well, not only does your fire coating your left side give you a way to deter enemies from attacking, but your right side can produce icy armor like your first hero suit, Izuku pointed out, recalling Shoto's rather plain yet intimidating first design for his suit. You could do something similar to coat your arm or leg with ice for better defense or striking power. And with your legs, you could use fire to propel yourself like your father, but strike with something like a fiery roundhouse or a straight kick armored with ice. I see, Shoto muttered, looking through the notes that Midoriya pointed out, nodding along as the rather detailed drawings helped him imagine it vividly. Interesting. But if you also want to create your own version of Fafnir Punch or Vanishing Fist, instead of a straight right hook, how about a fiery uppercut? Izuku pointed out another part. Something similar to Ryu's Shoryuken but enhanced with your left side for more firepower. You can even have different variations depending on how much power you want to put into it, like using your ice to propel yourself and your opponent further into the air with an ice pillar or curving your fist's trajectory so when you punch, you can launch them away with spires of fire similar to gunflame. Shoto latched onto that and visualized the movements occurring in his mind as Midoriya spoke. Yes, the ice can help travel momentum into my uppercut, and aspiring fire can help drive enemies back even if the move doesn't strike. Todoroki nodded, looking at his best friend with a soft smile. Your analysis never ceases to impress. Just looking to help out a friend in a similar situation. Izuku grinned brightly. All Might and Endeavor saw the two interacting and learning from one another. The two number one heroes, one current and the other former, smiled at the friendship formed between boys. A friendship that the two men didn't have, though the lack of it was more on the current number one than the former. All Might felt pride at seeing the boy he saw as a son help others as usual, but this time more confidently and assuredly, aiding young Todoroki from a situation the green-haired boy was once in. Endeavor meanwhile appreciated Midoriya for being the friend that Shoto always needed and never had before, something that he felt responsible for with how he raised the boy. And the fact he was aiding him further with his left and right sides when he already helped his son in finally using his left. Endeavor hated to admit it, but he felt indebted to the boy. Maybe make a part of the family, Endeavor thought, wondering how to get Midoriya and his son closer. Fuyumi isn't seeing anybody. Meanwhile, as Izuku and Shoto grew closer as best friends, Bakugo watched from afar with a neutral expression. And because this is anime, Soul can trigger his second form, the Dragon Install. The final move was shown transforming Soul into a black and red form. His armor looking like it was made out of obsidian, and his main body looked like it was made of lava, while his head became a dragon-like helm with dragon-like wings and horns sprouting from the head. He looks so badass, Kirishima exclaimed, steam shooting out of his nose at seeing Soul become what looked like a humanoid dragon man. Agreed, Setsuna and Rin grinned, both fans of dragons too, one for their obvious reptilian looks and the other because of his quirk. The Dragon Install allows Soul to safely tap into a fraction of his full gear power, boosting his strength, speed, and healing ability, was explained the Dragon Install. The drawback? He can only sustain this power for so long and afterward, he's left vulnerable. Similar to my Flash Fire Fist if I use it too long, Endeavor thought. Does that mean when he uses the Dragon Install, the form he takes is somewhat similar to how he would look in his true form? Bondo asked. Perhaps, Jirota nodded. Though, it could be how his true form looks with the only difference being the scope of the true power he uses. It's also similar to Ragna's Blood Cane form, Ectoplasm pointed out. Both have similar functions of boosting the other abilities for a short period. Though where one drains the soul of others on contact, this Dragon Install instead increases his healing ability. Sounds like it could end up as a battle of attrition if they pop those out simultaneously, Fat Gum figured. As Soul wandered the earth, that man began a plan for world domination using an army of gears. Boomstick continued with the backstory. In response, Soul put together a gear-obliterating superweapon called Outrage, which looks like the world's most complicated can opener, Wiz muttered, gazing upon the almost indescribable weapon. Or next-gen Bop It. Looks more like some weird futuristic spray painter. Kaminari scratched his head and narrowed his gaze. Or a type of scanner, Melissa muttered. Though, if it can be used to take down gears, its function could be to nullify whatever magic or technology operates the gears, like a gear EMP. Or it can be a super weapon that can just destroy any kind of gear in its path, May suggested while trying to break free of her confines. Why yeah, or that, Melissa's sweat dropped. All Might frowned at the thought of that man using an army of gears for world domination. The gears under that man sounded frighteningly close to All for One and his legion of Nomus, most of which were dangerous enough on their own, but now include the likes of high-end Nomus that can match the strength of a #1 hero, and with a level of intelligence of their own, making them more unpredictable and dangerous if not immediately defeated. Turns out it was so powerful, nobody could wield it, not even Soul, Boomstick revealed with a chuckle. So, he had to split it apart into 8 pieces just to make it usable. The screen showed a sword being split into 8 pieces, each comprising a different type of power. Naturally, he took the best piece for himself, the flame-enhanced fire seal. The screen showed Soul's signature weapon. I want a fire seal. That'd be fucking sweet. Try and eat me now, orca whale. Fire seal. An image of an orca whale was shown before a seal on fire overshadowed it. Coda didn't know whether to facepalm, shiver with horrified fright, or glare venomously at Boomstick at the thought of the gun-loving maniac setting a poor seal on fire. Split into 8 different pieces, Izuku muttered, finding the number rather coincidental given the number of past users One for All now has with him as the 9th wielder. Almost like the different quirks of the past users for every piece. If you split One for All's transfer power and stockpiling power between the first and All Might. So, the other pieces must possess powers that relate to those names, Momo analyzed, such as geokinetic abilities for Earth and electrokinesis for Thunder. And the outrage must be big if one part of it ended up as a giant sword like Soul's, Setsuna pointed out. Though there appeared to be rather redundant names for some of them, Ida noticed. What distinction could there be between Earth, Valley, and Mountain? They all share similar characteristics with the Earth. Maybe one power relies more on manipulating the ground, another on earthly minerals like stone, and another with things one can find in a valley like plants or nature, Shoji guessed. Using Fire Seal to its full potential, Soul defeated that man's forces twice over, was revealed. And then he decided to upgrade the shit out of it with the Junkyard Dog Mark III casing, Boomstick noted. Did he just cock some ammo into the sword like it was a gun? Mina blinked repeatedly, before staring and pointing blankly at the screen. The fact that he was able to upgrade it, when combined as the outrage no one could even use it, is impressive. Melissa smiled, liking Soul more with his clear expertise in inventing powerful items and technology. Feats. Completely incinerated a huge gear with a fraction of his power. Survived witnessing his past self die. Actual reason given, because he's Soul Badguy. Outran a missile and hung on to it with just his fist. Endured the soul-destroying atmosphere of the backyard. Once stabbed through the shoulder, and then used that same arm to swing his sword seconds later. But this is hardly the full extent of Soul's power, was pointed out. He once survived the backyard, an alternate dimension which would annihilate the soul of a normal man. And by removing his headband, he can access his full, unrestrained potential. Yep, definitely looking more draconic, Ryukyu grinned. So, there's an alternate dimension that would normally kill any man and he just walks around like nothing's wrong, Mirako whistled. Damn, what a flex. Manly, Kirishima and Tetsu exclaimed. Like when he shot a laser out of his sword to incinerate an inhuman gear the size of Mount Everest. Boomstick exclaimed. Huh! Mineta exclaimed in fright. Bakugo stared slack-jawed at the screen, both envious and impressed by the feat. And once, he went back in time and witnessed his past self get murdered, which should have erased him from the present a la Marty McFly, was noted. But he didn't like that idea very much, so he just didn't. Imagine being such a badass that you see a past version of you die, you start getting erased from existence, and then just scream for universe and just walk it off, Boomstick chuckled. WW what? Momo exclaimed, eyes the size of dinner plates. That should be impossible. Manly. Kirishima and Tetsu exclaimed louder. You can't just scream manly and expect that to resolve how something like that is possible. Momo yelled at the two. Okay, I think you might need to calm down, Yamamoto. Kyoka and Izuku lowered the stuttering heiress back to her seat. Eri, please get Momo some tea before she loses her mind. I mean Miss Kyo. Eri saluted and ran to the drinks and snacks to get some tea for Momo. Soul is powerful but fears his full potential, was explained. He's also pretty lazy. His favorite strategy is always whatever's the least strenuous. This lack of extra effort can sometimes leave him underestimating his opponent. All Might frowned, seeing how such a personal weakness could leave him vulnerable against Ragna. Yet All Might couldn't help but sympathize with Soul for fearing his full potential, just as he taught Midoriya. He never used the full might of one for all for fear of accidentally creating earthquakes with every step. In words similar to Superman, one of his counterparts, Toshinori had to be very careful in how he fought and constantly hold himself back, in fear of destroying foes comparable to being made of cardboard. But the second he starts trying, few can stand in his way, Boomstick declared. You supposed to be a zombie or something. How many times do I gotta kill you before it sticks? Soul Badguy questioned harshly. Bakugu grinned at Soul's line, relating and appreciating his style. The group received Soul relatively well for his engineering skills by the inventors and his strength and power. However, others still held Soul with suspicion and wariness for whatever his part may have been in the death of his fiancée, or how such power could be disastrous if used without restraint. To Izuku, Bakugu, and Todoroki, they couldn't help but compare Soul's power, physics-defying feats, and sheer energy and not see a rougher, more rugged version of All Might. Alright, the combatants are set, Wiz stated. Let's end this debate once and for all. It's time for a death battle, Boomstick yelled out. As the video paused to scan for counterparts, the group began to vote among themselves on who would win the battle. Those who would vote for Ragna included Todoroki, who, while he gained the usual information for his training and similarly saw Soul to all might and strength, couldn't help but vote for the tragic man who lost his right side to his brother, was treated like a lab rat and experiment, and had a similar aesthetic to him with the white hair, mismatched eyes, and differing arms and powers. Endeavor would likewise vote for the white-haired man and held a similar reluctance to his son in wanting to vote for Soul, though it was mainly for the bounty hunter's fire-based powers. In truth, Endeavor could not shake the sight of Tuya from either Ragna's tragic life, the maniacal look in Jin's eyes, or how similar Ragna was to his son. Tokoyami also would vote for the Grim Reaper because of his similar dark powers and techniques, a monstrous form that can occur through a loss of control and anger, and his brooding and dark persona that made Tokoyami feel connected to the wanted man. Reiko and Korwaro would also vote for the most wanted man in the world for his dark and brooding personality, literal inner demons, and rebellious nature. Hawks likewise voted for Ragna's rebellious nature against an oppressive system, and for the man's sense of freedom and no-shits-given attitude for walking around in broad daylight despite the size of his bounty. Eri voted for Ragna for how she related to being treated and experimented like a lab rat and being saved by a hero, Kamakiri for Ragna's badass sword that can also turn into a scythe, Monoma for Ragna's soul-sucking abilities that can be extended with the blood edge, and Pony out of sympathy and pity for Ragna's sad backstory, especially his sick sister, betraying brother, and horrible fate. The Pussycats would all vote for Ragna out of a sense of solidarity for being saved and trained by a literal cat ninja, and despite their earlier displeasure regarding blood, and his seeming relation of some sort to Takaka, Toga's counterpart, Ida and Uraraka would also vote for Ragna. Ida felt sympathy for Ragna's betrayal at the hands of his brother. When he looked at the mad eyes of Terumi or the blood-stained sword, Ida felt like he was seeing Stain or Shigaraki, only adding to his sympathy for Ragna. As for Uraraka, she felt a connection to Ragna's story, but not out of anything personal or relatable, but seeing Noelle, the clone of his sister, save him from his doomed fate as the Black Beast was something that she felt at her core. Ragna seemed like something of rebellious hero in that world, and Noelle saved him when he needed it the most, just she wanted to do for Deku and others. As for those who voted for Soul Badguy, among them included Izuku and Bakugu, both teens for much the same reasons. Both saw how Soul's strength, power, and ability to defy the odds were like the indomitable spirit of All Might, with Bakugo liking Soul's more rough and hardcore personality while Izuku related to Soul's hesitancy to use his full power. All Might would also vote for the fiery bounty hunter, relating to the man's fear of using his full power, seeing and sympathizing with the guilt of having an evil force use the memory of a past loved one against him, and was impressed with his power and strength. The inventors of the group, David Shield, Melissa, Power Loader, and May, all voted for Soul Badguy. Not only was he the most technically gifted, but he seemed responsible for the appearance of these gears in the first place, and created an unstoppable superweapon that he split apart and even further upgraded the weapon's effectiveness. That desire to improve what already worked inspired May, who held the same drive to always improve on her babies. David and Melissa Shield also saw similar traits with All Might and Soul, but David related to Frederick in how they both lost the love of their lives, knowing that he must have felt guilt, especially when faced with justice. Ryukyu, Setsuna, and Rin all voted for Soul for his dragon-like elements from the glimpse at his true form with the dragon installed, his fiery abilities, and proud and fierce nature, while Kirishima and Tetsu found Soul the tougher, rougher, and manlier choice with his impressive feats and power. Kirishima even found Soul's personality to be rather similar to Bakugo's too. Could have found Soul Badguy a lot cooler and stronger than Ragna's brooding emo look. Naruko and Fat Gum voted for Soul's impressive strength, power, and endurance to survive in an inhospitable dimension like the junkyard, and Mizu for Soul's remarkable powers, brilliant engineering mind hiding all that muscle and attitude, and the humor revolving the naming convention between Soul and that man's names. Multiversal counterparts detected. The device began in its reverberating monotone voice. Ragna. Multiversal counterpart 1. Shoto Todoroki. Endeavor flinched worse, the one thing he was hoping for at the moment failing. As he looked down and saw the students congratulating his son on such a powerful and cool counterpart, all Endeavor could picture now was his son losing his right arm, the arm the boy contributed to his mother, and his eldest brother staring down at him psychopathically with a bloody sword. Ragna. Multiversal counterpart 2. Fumikage Tokoyami. Aha! I knew it! Hawks grinned victoriously. I knew if anyone here was going to be a brooding bad boy with dark shadowy powers, it was definitely Tokoyami. This should be a moment of revelry, but he's sucking the joy out of it. Tokoyami groaned while Hawks laughed boastfully. Well, if you won't say it, I will. Dark Shadow popped out, one shadowy claw giving a big thumbs up. Revelry in the dark. Cute, Reiko thought, keeping her giggle behind a hand over her mouth. Frederick aka Soul Badguy. Multiversal counterpart 1. Toshinori Yagi aka All Might. Yep, could definitely see that, Mount Lady sighed. After the blowing up Mount Everest feat, it was like a coin toss between All Might or Endeavor for me. Ahaha, I suppose that means I'm a fire user like yourself, Endeavor. All Might poked the new #1 side with his elbow in his buffed state. Stop talking or I'll punch you back into that skinny form myself, Endeavor growled. Multiversal counterpart 2. Katsuki Bakugo. Ha! Eat shit, you extras. Bakugo jumped from his seat and pointed boastfully at the students of both classes. I told you I was the best and I'm the strongest and baddest in that world to prove it. By that logic, Midoriya is more of a main character given how much main character energy his counterparts have, like Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter or Sonic. Todoroki deadpan stared at Bakugo. Zip it, icy hot. Bakugo barked. Additional counterparts detected. The device continued. Jubii Mitsuyoshi. Multiversal counterpart. Kigo Takami aka Hawks. Ahahaha. This keeps getting better and better. Hawks laughed harder. Ha, how about that? You have a counterpart that would look at your wings and think you are breakfast. Miruko grinned. I wonder if he knew if Aizawa would feel jealous. Midnight theorized in her head. Knowing how much that grumpy Gus likes cats and being a cat ninja teacher would be quite the funny dream come true for him. Jin Kisaragi. The device showed Ragna's cold brother. Multiversal counterpart. Debii aka Error. True identity classified based upon current timeline. Suddenly, all laughter, humor, or playful bantering was cut cold under the image of Dobby alongside Jean. Some of the group couldn't help but find the same psychotic-like grins and gleam in their eyes rather similar. Todoroki paled, his jaw dropping slightly. "Dobby as my brother," Todoroki said internally, considering the thought almost disgusting and horrible. The man was a member of the League, a fire quirk user that acted as the literal opposite of what he was. And he was the one who successfully kidnapped Bakugo where he failed to save his classmate. Well, isn't that a tragedy? Poor little Shoto Todoroki. Dobby's words echoed in his mind. Shoto shivered, recalling the odd familiarity that Dobby's voice had when he addressed him and said his name as if the villain knew him. He remembered the Fulgore vs. Sector death battle when Dobby was revealed to be Sector's counterpart. Shoto had pondered whether Dobby was perhaps a distant relative of his father's side. Dobby had similar turquoise-colored eyes as he and his father. He possessed a powerful fire quirk, and the familiar relation would explain the tone of Dobby's personal-like taunt toward him. Endeavor glared and gritted teeth again at the sight of Dobby, the suspicions and dread in his mind buzzing again, telling him something about Dobby was off, that there was more to this member of the League than the patchworked murderer that he was, something that he should know but couldn't quite put his finger on. Hawks felt the same as his #1 colleague, though he felt personally more suspicious than even him. When Nizu told him how the device even compared counterparts to well-known villains like Dobby and Shigaraki, Hawks's attention was caught very quickly. Hawks had done his best to dig into the histories, secrets, and inner workings of the League and the former MLA members from the inside as a double agent, but there was only so much he could do without raising suspicion. Twice was the easiest to get information out of, the duplicating League member, already trusting him and viewing him as a friend. Yet not even Twice Blabbermouth could give up the closest secrets of his friends. Shigaraki and Dobby were the hardest to get anything out of, one he hadn't seen since his inauguration as the leader of the Paranormal Liberation Front, and the other was just as elusive to pin down as he appeared constantly watching him like a hawk, ironically enough. But, if Hawks could get more info on the League through the device, it would help to figure out more of their weaknesses. He said nothing when Shigaraki's true name came up after being revealed as Kid Boo's counterpart, but the winged hero was contemplating whether or not to inform the HPSC. While he was now obviously plotting against their corrupt system with Nizu, he still needed to be in their good graces, and they had the resources to figure out who Tenko Shimura was and find the paper trail that could lead to how he became Shigaraki. That was the tricky part of being a spy and snitch for so many different people. He had to choose what to give away and what to keep close to the chest, all the while resenting everyone who held him on a leash like a caged bird. Hawks kept back a disappointed scoff when the device failed to produce Dobby's real identity, even if Nizu warned him that happened with Sector too. Still, Kigo had hoped that his presence could have done something for the device to spill the beans, as improbable and out of pocket as it could have been. But he guessed that wasn't the case. However, the fact that his counterpart was brothers with Shoto Todoroki was something. Even if it was clear that the comparisons between a person from their world to another weren't 100% accurate, after all. He wasn't an eye-patch-wearing cat. There had to be a greater reason for why Dobby and Todoroki were connected to these siblings beyond just that both Dobby and Jean looked sinister. I have to find out more about who you are, Dobby, Hawks thought. The sooner I do, the sooner we heroes can strike before it's too late. With nothing more to say or ponder, the video continued with the fight. The video began with the light of the full moon shining over the cloudy, rainy nighttime of BlazBlue's Kagutsuchi during a rainstorm. In a large garden, a wanted poster of Ragna hung on one of the large plants. Soul looked over the poster and Bounty with a clear interest. "Ah, I wanted to see that goofy poster again," Pony whined. "It was rather amusing," Reiko giggled. Todoroki and Tokoyami hid their embarrassed blushes, which only grew worse by the snickering of their classmates. Coincidentally, Ragna walked right past Soul. The gear bounty hunter noticed him before turning back to the poster, and then back to Ragna. He would comically repeat this until finally running after his bounty. "It appears I was right," Ryukyu smirked. And quickly at that. Soul ran past Ragna, stopping in front of the most wanted man in the world. "You're an eyesore." Soul Badguy spoke in Japanese, gesturing to Ragna with the hilt of his blade. Oh, he's speaking in Japanese. Momo perked up. With a name like Frederick, I expected he would be German or American. Pony sighed, grateful that there were at least subtitles for the Japanese. While improving her Japanese, the American transfer student didn't want to focus on both the subtitles and the fight. Who are you? Out of my way or you're dead, Ragna questioned before threatening. Tisk. Soul blew air between his gritted teeth before slamming his fire seal into the ground. Gun flame. Spires of fire shot out of the ground. Ragna stepped back to avoid them. It does sound like girlfriend when he yells it out, Ciro chuckled. You gotta be kidding me, Ragna scoffed, adjusting the collar of his red coat. Let's get this over with. I'll burn you to a crisp, Soul Badguy threatened back. Might be hard to collect that bounty if the guy's burned to a crisp there, Chief, Hawks pointed out. I'm sure he will at least leave something intact to prove his claim, Ectoplasm shrugged. Fight. Soul charged at Ragna, quickly reaching his target. Ragna met Soul's fire seal with his aramesa, the blades producing sparks as they contested each other's strength. Eventually, Soul shifted the blade and diverted his force, bringing the blood scythe down to the ground, forcing Ragna off his balance. Impressive, Edgeshot nodded. The way Soul held his blade allowed him to not only contest with an equally strong opponent but long enough so that when diverted the flow of his strength, it would leave Ragna vulnerable. Kamakiri made a mental note to try this tactic with his blades on an opponent in the future. Gun flame. Soul unleashed another of the rising fires, only for Ragna to recover and jump away again. Ragna leaped back and swung a high descending slash down at Soul, who avoided the deadly strike by stepping back too. Ragna dodged a downward slash before the two contested blades again. They're both quick to recover and appear equal in physical strength thus far, Endeavor noted. And with their giant blades, they got a whole lot of range on them, Miruko nodded. Eventually, they broke apart with Ragna quick to go for a strike. The Grim Reaper slashed his sword forward, yet Soul quickly blocked the slashes with fire seal. As Ragna launched a wide slash to Badguy's midsection, Soul jumped upward and kicked Ragna in the face. Ragna was growing impatient and wilder with his attacks, which left him open to a counterattack, Momo deduced. Compared to Soul's laid-back, lazy nature, he was willing to keep defending until Ragna slipped up, Kyoka nodded. The force of the kick sent Ragna skipping off the ground and flying toward a wall. Bouncing off the wall, Ragna's body flew toward an awaiting Soul in the air. The bounty hunter kicked Ragna multiple times, continuing to attack him before his body could reach the ground. At the third and final time, Badguy slashed and sent Reagan upward with a volcanic viper, ending the combo with a bandit revolver, sending the similarly red-clothed swordsman to the ground. Yep, that's a sign of a fighting game character, Sin grinned. Juggling. Ragna bounced off the ground yet recovered with an acrobatic roll into a handstand before finally settling on his knees, breathing heavily. Bitch! Ragna growled, raising his Azure Grimoire in front of him. He's going to use the Azure Grimoire, Achiko exclaimed, excited. Restriction number 6- before Ragna could finish. He was cut off by another kick to the face, courtesy of Soul's bandit revolver. Hey Soul! I know I voted for the guy but that was a cheap shot, Kirishima exclaimed. Remember what I told you, Kirishima, Fat Gum spoke up. In a battle, you can't allow the luxury to give your opponent the upper hand because it's honorable. Every second of a fight counts, and Soul would have been foolish to let Ragna power up an attack that could hurt him. Yes, Fat Gum Sensei, Kirishima bowed. You're gonna pay. Ragna raged, punching the ground before swiping his Azure Grimoire upward. Suddenly, the black and red glowing head of a dead spike rose from the ground, trapping Soul between its razor-sharp fangs. Restriction 666 released. Dimensional interruption imaginary number formed. Ragna raised his Azure Grimoire to his face, the eye on his hand opening and glowing red. Blaze Blue activate. Smart, Cementos nodded. He used the dead spike to trap and contain Soul long enough for him to activate his intended technique. Tokoyami too nodded, acknowledging Ragna's tactic. Tokoyami imagined if he could perform something similar with Dark Shadow, replacing the Black Beast's head with Dark Shadow. The only issue would be that I cannot summon Dark Shadow from anywhere other than my own body, Tokoyami thought. Attempting this could leave me vulnerable if my foe possesses a quirk that could affect me by touch. Ibera shivered at hearing the number 666. Knowing that number was infamous for being the devil's cursed number, she wondered if this related to Ragna being what could be considered the devil of his universe. Ragna charged at Soul, and as the dead spike holding Soul disappeared, Ragna launched a powerful punch at Soul, sending the fiery gear flying into another area of the city, a more residential area. For a moment, Toshinori worried about the chance of civilian causalities in such a residential-looking area, yet the facts settled his mind. For one, aside from the two previous ones, civilians often weren't depicted in the fights, and two, this was all a simulation, so no actual civilians were in danger. Soul bounced off a wall as he previously did to Ragna. Before he could hit the ground, Ragna appeared, stabbing Soul into the ground with both the Azure Grimoire and Blood Scythe. "It's my turn now," Ragna yelled as he brought Soul into the air with a slash from the Aramesa, slashing brutally onto Soul Badguy with Ragna's own mid-air combo. Ragna's giving Soul a taste of his own medicine. Kamakiri grinned. This could be even more damaging since Ragna's attacking with his blade compared to Soul, who mostly kicked at him, Shota calculated. A rising upward slash combined with an uppercut brought Soul further up before Ragna slammed Soul downward, the bounty hunter bouncing off the ground shortly. Ragna ran to pick up his enemy, but whatever grapple the Grim Reaper intended was reversed by Soul kicking Ragna off of him, rushing to grapple him instead, and throwing Ragna into the wall, the white-haired fighter bouncing brutally off it and onto the street. "Damn, that got kind of brutal and personal there," Sato cringed. Ragna rolled and recovered onto his knees. "Idea engine linked," Ragna exclaimed, a bright bluish-white light shining from his Azure Grimoire. "This'll sting." A wave of whitish-blue light shot out of the Azure Grimoire. The light slammed into Soul, knocking and pinning into the wall. "That was his force field ability," Izuku pointed out. "Did he just use a force field as a physical attack?" Setsuna blinked, surprised. "It is a rather innovative move," Itsuka nodded, approving. "Taking an ability often used for defense and making it into an offensive weapon. Yeah, turn defense into offense. You're speaking my language, big sis Kendo," Tetsu exclaimed, pumped up. "Manly." Suka blushed. "Thanks, Tetsu." Itsuka scratched at her blushing cheek. Setsuna grinned mischievously at the sight. As the light dissolved, Soul fell face down onto the floor. Suddenly, Soul's muffled voice groaned before he swiftly rose to his feet. His body covered and glowing with red light and fire, fiery silhouettes of dragon-like wings on his back. "He's using his dragon install," Rin exclaimed. "Hey, not so fast. Blood cane." Ragna roared, the black and blood-red wings sprouting from him before disappearing, leaving only a shadowy aura around the Grim Reaper. "It appears I was right to assume they would their respective boosts simultaneously," Cementos said. "But which one will last and hit harder?" Snipe asked. The two charged at each other, clashing blades as they passed. Soul attempted to follow up with a heavy left hook, but Ragna's sword blocked it without the wanted man even looking. However, Soul pressed on with a roundhouse kick, stunning Ragna. Soul Badguy followed it up with an uppercut and sword slash, sending the wanted Grim Reaper airborne again. Soul continued hammering into Ragna with a mid-air combo. Honestly, even if he got overwhelmed, that no-look sword block was sick, Kaminari shrugged. As they neared the wall of the building, Ragna suddenly reversed the assault, slamming a knee strike onto Soul before tossing him back to the ground. Ragna flew downward and swung the blood scythe only for Soul to roll out of the way. The two clashed and contested their blades against each other before breaking apart. The two traded and matched blows against the other evenly. "Their speed appears evenly matched," Ectoplasm commented. "The only possible difference could be Ragna's greater sense of urgency." This proceeded until Ragna grabbed Soul's head and slammed him to the ground, tossing the bounty hunter into the air. Ragna swiftly ran to where Soul would land and punched him back up. Ragna jumped up to perform another brutal combo of mid-air sword slashes on Soul. Inferno Divider. Ragna slashed upward a final time. What makes the Blood Cane more dangerous is its ability to steal the soul and energy from Ragna's foes, Midnight mentioned. While the Dragon Install may boost Soul's regeneration, those multiple fast attacks could overwhelm Badguy. Nizu smiled knowingly. Ragna landed and exited Blood Cane while Soul fell to the ground. His Dragon Install faded as he knelt on the ground, momentarily stunned. And while Ragna appears to suffer no drawback from Blood Cane vanishing, Dragon Install can leave Soul vulnerable, Vlad King noticed. Tap him out. Ragna mocked as he grabbed Soul and held him up. Just as he did, Ragna placed Blood Scythe in front of him, extended it and stabbed Soul, who screamed out in pain. I'm not gonna waste any more time on you, asshole. Ragna removed Soul from his blade and tossed him to the ground. I see that this battle is finished, Monoma grinned. 3, 2, 1 Setsuna counted off. Ragna exclaimed in pain, blood sprouting. Shit! The screen pulled back to see Soul had stabbed Ragna above the groin with Fire Seal. You'd think you would have learned by now, Yui muttered, only furthering Monoma's annoyance. As Ragna backed up and pulled the sword from his body, Soul rose. His fists lit up with fire. Fafnir punch. Soul roared as he struck Ragna further back with a fiery left hook. Ragna staggered and held his side as he bled. As he did, the screen began turning dark with black clouds surrounding him. His heartbeat growing louder and louder. His very form glitching and spasming. Tokoyami's eyes widened. The beast has been unleashed, Tokoyami knowingly whispered. Finally, Ragna's body was swallowed in darkness, and out from a writhing mass of shadows, a head of the black beast loomed past the rainy clouds before being joined by a multitude of razor-sharp, white-eyed draconic heads. Shoji and Izuku didn't mean to, but the sight reminded them of when Dark Shadow's red-eyed monstrous form chased them with Tokoyami trapped inside. While the black beast roared, Soul looked up at the eight-headed beast. Ultimately, Soul removed his headband as smoke covered him. A flash of red light shined from within before a pillar of fire blasted away the smoke as wings grew from Soul's shadowed form. Finally, Soul emerged in his true gear form, most of his body glowing like a dark lava lamp. His torso covered in obsidian black armor, and Soul Badguy's had a mix of a knight's helm and a dragon's head. Looks like both are going all out, Ryukyu grinned at the sight of the dragon-like gear. As the black beast's heads charged towards Soul, Soul raised the fire seal, the weapon opening and charging up a large orb of crackling concentrated energy before firing a massive blast of fire and energy. The energy overtook and overwhelmed the black beast's heads and body, the blast continuing through the sky until white light encapsulated all of Kogutsuchi. Tokoyami gritted his teeth while Dark Shadow hissed and retreated into Tokoyami. The flash of light receded and revealed Soul Badguy standing on a small piece of land in his regular form, with Ragna or the city nowhere to be seen. Soul then cracked his neck and scoffed. KO. Soul jumped into the rubble, coming across Ragna's lone blood scythe, picking up the weapon and walking off to who knows where. Bullseye! Boomstick exclaimed. Aha! Eat shit, icy hot. Bakugu gloated. And you too, emo bird. Somehow he makes victory taste bitter. Setsuna sweat dropped. Agreed, muttered the students who voted for Soul. Ragna put up a tough fight, but Soul had him outclassed, was stated. Likely due to the fact that while Ragna had on 4 belts, Soul had 18, Boomstick pointed out. So, Soul won because he had more drip. Kaminari dumbed down an already dumb joke. Please never ever say that word again. Kyoka poked her jacks at his head threateningly. Soul's centuries worth of fighting experience trumped Ragna's training, and he has consistently shaken off wounds more easily, was explained. Even Soul's soul is tough enough to withstand Ragna's Azure Grimoire, just like when it survived the backyard, Boomstick pointed out. Just as I summarized, Nizu chuckled. While Ragna's ability to steal the souls and energy of his foes would be dangerous, especially under the effects of blood cane, Soul Badguy has displayed resilience against such effects by simply existing in that realm. So, all Ragna did was hold back Soul's regeneration rather than simply stealing it for himself. Mandalay sighed, disappointed. Shit. Pixie Bob clicked her teeth. The Black Beast was impressive, but Soul's gear form is leagues above, Wiz continued. Recall when Soul turned that gear the size of Mount Everest into dust. By comparing the size of the gear to the clouds, we can determine its volume to be around 140 billion cubic meters. We showed the math on screen, including the average height of cumulonimbus clouds, around 2,500 meters, and the gear's estimated diameter of 6,000 meters. Destroying something this size would require more than 85 gigatons of TNT. That's nearly 200 times more powerful than the 9.0 earthquake that hit Japan in 2011. Such a tragic event for our nation. Edgeshot sighed sadly, bowing his head in respect for those lost lives. Honestly, the fact he blew up something the size of Mount Everest was practically all you needed to know that he would take the cake, Miruko bragged. Then what was that nervous foot-tapping you had when he was stabbed? Ryukyu raised an eyebrow. That was just me being excited for the fight. Miruko defended herself but could not remove the blush from her tan cheeks. More than enough to take Ragna down. And that was only a fraction of Soul's real power. Ragna just burned out in the end. Boomstick punned. Even I know that was a lazy one. Mirio gave a thumbs down but still smiled. The winner is Soul Badguy, Wiz announced. Respectful and victorious claps sounded as winners and losers accepted the results. Even if Bakuga's boasting dampened the fun for the winners. At least we got some good notes for you to train with. Izuku nervously scratched his cheek. I'd argue it was mostly you that got those notes, Todoroki stated as a matter of fact. But you're right, Midoriya. Shame though for the volcanic viper. If only I had a sword. Those words rang the dinner bell in May's head as she grabbed one of the notebooks Midoriya gave to her and Melissa and began writing down ideas, rough drafts, and blueprints for Todoroki's issue. Maybe a set of twin blades that can extend his quirk out through them. That would be fitting considering his name. May brainstormed. Probably will need a sample of his DNA for his quirk to travel through the blades as if they were an extension of his body. Ooh, that could also work for See-Through Girl so she doesn't have to go out heroing naked. I know Muscles will probably get really protective of her soon enough. Wait, how did you get out? Melissa exclaimed, shocked by May's escape from her confines. Next time on Death Battle, Boomstick announced. Rocking music played with the rhythmic chanting of warriors. Scenes between the two fighters played through the music. Starting with the eyes of a shocked man with a bowl cut looking at a blade sticking through a hand with swirls of sand coming out. It switched to that of a girl in fancy clothes atop a hill in a dense forest laughing with a flying boar, before running away. One of the fighters was protected in a cocoon of hardened sand and dirt, a large crack in the front showing the man's robed figure while hundreds of quills or nails sticking out of the cocoon. A shot was shown of a few nails launched at the boy's face, showing his cold blue eyes, short red hair, and a red kanji on the left side of his forehead, with the nails stopped by a tendril of earth. The same boy was shown with his hands clapped together while a tidal wave of dirt and sand grew menacingly over his opponent. The other fighter was shown as a small black-haired girl with a green and yellow bandana and clothing lifting a large and heavy belt over her head like it was nothing. Her face held a frown. Yet her dull, sightless eyes were the most visually striking feature. The girl was shown slamming her bare foot onto the ground while crossing her arms in a stance, resulting in pillars of earth shooting up out of the ground and pinning several armored warriors onto the ceiling. A shot was shown of the same girl, now an elderly woman, sending a wave of mud and dirt onto a muscular dark-skinned girl with short hair, and back again as a young girl slamming her foot onto the ground, producing a shockwave of dirt and earth onto her foes. Both fighters' still images faced each other as the name of the fight was shown. Gara vs. Toph. Yes, Earth Battle. Pixie Bob jumped from her seat, pumping her fists into the air. These characters both seem to have an affinity for controlling aspects of the Earth, Mandalay acknowledged. Though both look so young, especially the girl. Which only makes her feats shown more impressive, Tiger noted. May looked over to Principal Mizu for his nod of approval. As he gave it, May pressed the play button and started the video. As the pink-haired girl did so, Midnight couldn't help but think of Aizawa, and thus the same for Mike and their visit to Tartaros. To discover the truth, Midnight wondered how it was going. We've identified the factor that served as the base. Tsukachi's words were a prelude to a dreadful revelation his guests knew already. Even still, the tired and joyless-looking detective had to say the words as officially as protocol demanded. However, a part of him wanted to drag this out longer for him to say. Not for any perverse satisfaction in seeing his guests suffer, but because it was painful to himself to have to be the one to cement theory into reality. A reality that would reopen old pain and crush their best hopes to pieces. Tsukachi stood in a control room run by a few Tartaros employees. The large blue screen wrapped around the front of the room showed various readings, including alpha factor levels, security parameters, heartbeat detection, and even the room temperature. Nothing was unmonitored for this cell's special occupant, and nothing was left to chance or luck. Finally, the screen in the middle was the camera's feed overlooking the prisoner himself. The prisoner sat in the middle of the room, the floor around him as white as marble, but the rest was dark and unseeable. The prisoner's seat was movable, yet his restraints, ranging from straps over his legs, an X-shaped harness over his torso, and a white straitjacket as his article of clothing that helped tie his hands, kept him shackled and still. All that they could see of the prisoner's head was purple and black smoke. Previously, Tsukachi and Gran Torino had welcomed their guests, Shoyuta Aizawa aka Raceahead and Hisashi Yamada aka Present Mike, into the room, guarded heavily by locked doors and armed personnel. The detective told them about the prisoner's condition and actions in Tartaros, only communicating for trivial factoids but clamping up entirely when asked about Shigaraki or the League of Villains. Tsukachi then got into the topic that he was dreading to reveal. The detective informed them that several quirk factors were added to the prisoner's DNA, jamming them onto the base quirk to form a single new quirk. All four men stared at Kurogiri, the close associate of Tomura Shigaraki, the de facto leader of the League of Villains, his quirk, Warp Gate, and his status now revealed fully as a Nomu himself, a high-end Nomu probably. Now, Tsukachi had to tell them the quirk that was the base factor for Warp Gate, and by proxy, Kurogiri's true identity. With a heavy said, Tsukachi said, "Turns out it belonged to a kid you were quite familiar in your UA days." Present Mike stared at the screen with gritted teeth in a frown and nervous sweat running down his brow. Aizawa had a hand over his face, trying in vain to shield his eyes from the prisoner or the memories worming their way to the surface of his mind. A young boy who lost his life way too soon while working to save others. Aizawa failed, and his best friend's smiling face and cloudy blue hair stared back at him, only for reality to take its place and the boy's face to fade into the shadowy mist of Kurogiri. Present Mick's eyes behind his shades were wide and distraught, while Aizawa's eyes were horrified and furious. We found out that this base quirk is a very close match to Oboro Shirakumo's.